you know, from an intellectual. That was kind of a funny song. We now have on Time Warner in New York City 1,998 channels. Can you believe it?
Shame in it. That would take a while just to work your way through them.
Well, it did just to do it, and it's all selling stuff. But those are all avenues that could be putting up really interesting education. How many? How many? How many?
20 seconds.
20 seconds.
15 seconds.
Okay, thank you. I got the count. Give me 3 seconds.
10 seconds.
Okay.
5, 4, 3.
Welcome very, very much to Conversation. It's a great personal honor and privilege for me to be doing a program with my friend in Detroit, Michigan, I being here in Manhattan Network at Manhattan Neighborhood Network, and that's Jerrey Herron, PhD, and he's the Dean of the Honors College at Wayne State University, which is my alma mater for both my bachelor's degree and my master's degree, and also I taught a stint there way back in the dark ages. But Jerrey, it's so good to be in touch with you via Skype and the wonders of the ability to talk across the miles.
Good to be with you, Harold, and always a delight to be with an alum.
You look good, as you always do. Very natty and very well put together, and I'm really pleased. We're going to be talking about Detroit and Wayne State University, and we might alert the audience to the fact that we're going to be doing 2 hours of programming on this particular project. And the first one, we're going to be talking about Wayne State and Detroit, because it's been very much in the news, having come out of bankruptcy and so forth, and Wayne State's a major institution. But before we do that, I wonder if we couldn't begin by having you share with us your own background. I know we share a connection to Bloomington and Indiana University, where we both did doctoral work and so forth. But could you share your own background, where you were born and raised, your education, and then we'll get into talking about all of that against the backdrop of what's been going on in Detroit, Michigan, my hometown, and your adopted hometown. But share your background, please, Jerrey.
Certainly. Glad to, Harold. I was born in Abilene, Texas. Mm-hmm. And at the point when it was time to go to college, I was fortunate to be accepted at the University of Texas in Austin,
yes,
which is where I did my bachelor's work. Mm-hmm. And then I was fortunate to be able to go to Indiana University, the university that you and I share, where I studied Victorian literature. And I was fortunate to be offered a job at Wayne State in 1982. And I came here fully with the expectation that I would become an academic Victorian scholar. And a wonderful thing happened for me, 2 wonderful things, as a matter of fact. One of them is that I discovered the great subject of the city of Detroit.
Yes.
The other one is that I was fortunate to have an employer, Wayne State University, that was patient and generous to me in letting me develop a career as a writer about cities and American city making, and especially the great city of Detroit, which I would propose to anybody, any place, is the most American place on planet Earth.
Wonderful. I see that article you wrote that I particularly had reference to before. It was masterful about Hudson's and so forth, and writing on that and challenging Gibbon and so forth. That's a major work that you did, talking about putting the city of Detroit within a historical context that was just brilliant.
I thank you, Carol. Yeah. Thank you very much. Well, what I've discovered when I first came here is that I looked at the city and began to take long walks around the town, and I would ask people to tell me their stories about their experience in the city. And I would ask people to tell me stories about what happened to that building and what happened to that building. Yeah. Pretty soon I discovered that some of the most consequential things that have happened to us as a people, as an American people, have taken place right here. That is certainly things that have to do with the automobile industry and the invention of the assembly line and modernity when it launches itself in that powerful way in the early 20th century.
Yeah, and it was the arsenal of democracy in the Second World War with Willow Run and so forth. In the Second War, yeah.
And I would say that beautiful phrase of Franklin Roosevelt's, the arsenal of democracy, and he was talking about America in general, but certainly the great industrial plant of Detroit. And it's not just that this is the arsenal of democracy in times of strife, like it was certainly in the Second World War with Willow Run. Yeah. this is also the arsenal of democracy in a larger sense. That is, we make the promise in that magisterial document of ours, the Declaration about life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness for all people. And I think the great industrial wealth of Detroit, the machine that made the modern industrial world possible, has produced the kind of wealth and mobility that make that arsenal of democracy a real promise, not just in times of war, but perhaps even more potently in times of peace, when it allows people a chance, a way to make their way in the world.
A huge theme, is it not?
It is indeed. As I said, I believe this is the most American place we have. It's a place of heroic triumphs, of extraordinary achievements, productivity that no one would have dreamed was possible. And it's also the place where all the work we have left to do lies to hand if we're going to live up to that promise in the Declaration about life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness for all of us.
Yeah, that particular article I had reference to. Your writing is all so well done and so forth, and you're to be congratulated. And you did your work in English then, I guess, right? Would it be fair to say you were a professor of English?
Yes, that is the rank that I hold that's what I studied at Indiana University, and that's my rank here at Wayne State. I'm a professor of English.
Yeah, well, you write magnificently, if I may say so, with great understanding. And we want to get into all the work you've done with the Honors College. We want to get into maybe toward the end of the, into the second part of the whole venture we're doing here today. But you write so well, and you were talking in a historical context that Detroit might be the most interesting place for people to concentrate in trying to understand an urbanizing planetary context. It might have reference not only to the United States, but to the world in terms of the settlement patterns and the development on a largely seen economic and social pattern of development. Detroit might be a model city, not only for the United States, but perhaps for the world that is urbanizing and has many of the same kind of issues that Detroit has dealt with, or not. Am I off base on that, or does that make some sense to you?
Oh, no, I don't think you're off base a bit. I think I would put it in two contexts, one national, American, and another one a global context. I think in an American context, in terms of the ways that we in this country have used cities, Detroit is quite typical in that way. Americans were not urban until the 1920 census. At the 1970 census, we had become the first suburban people to have existed. And if you looked at that kind of, if you can imagine a graph, I'm going to do a little graphic here, up and down. The city, the peak of the cities, and then the decline of cities. That pattern, which is characteristic of us nationally between the 1920 census, the 1950s when cities were at their peak, the 1970 census when we'd become the first suburban people, Detroit is just like that, except it's a steeper version of that same story. So it's so typical. It looks like an exception, except it's not. Now that's a national story.
Right.
And we have done something not like the way that other countries use cities, other industrial countries. They tend to build a city and then re-inhabit the city. We didn't do that. We came to the city, used the city, and then took off.
I can remember, I can remember as a young man, I was in high school and so forth, going down, they had a Grand River Avenue that would go downtown to the mighty Hudson's department store.
Right.
And I was a stock boy, or just a part-time, high school, going down to the Hudson's. That was a magnificent store that set a pattern for the whole nation. I guess it was second only to Macy's in terms of square footage or something. But that downtown area was really alive and a place where everybody congregated, destined to be superseded by, high-end malls and so forth. But Hudson's was a major part of that pattern that was the historical development of Detroit, no?
Surely. The Hudson's, and again, this is a typical Detroit thing that's typical of patterns all across the United States. The Jail Hudson store, and I believe you're correct in saying, in terms of internal square feet, it was the second largest store, only second to Macy's.
Incidentally, Jerry, Macy's is right on the corner of where I live, where I want you to come and visit me. We'll take a walk through Macy's, okay?
We shall indeed.
Shall
I
we
have fond
compare
memories of Macy's when I lived in New York.
Yeah, and that article you wrote about Hudson's, they said they weren't selling ink anymore. That was just such good writing. I'm sorry, I didn't. Let's talk a little bit about Hudson's and also the downtown area of Detroit that suffered pretty grievously in the recent decades, right?
Well, I think, again, there's a typical pattern in terms of what Americans do. We built cities created big downtown department stores, which I would like to think of as a kind of educational establishment. As people would come to the city, they would be enfranchised with a new kind of wealth and mobility that they hadn't had before. And one of the things that was necessary for people to learn how to do is to learn how to shop.
Yes, right,
Dress, how to act, how to comport themselves. And the department stores, many of them, J.L. Hudson's thought of itself this way, Marshall Field's thought of itself this way, as a kind of academy of culture. Where people would look at other people, they would learn from the clerks how to buy things, how to wear things, how to be city people, because we weren't city people, as I said, until the 1920s.
That's
that
right.
Was the first most of us had come to town. But then this is a distinctively American thing. We seem no sooner to have settled into town and these great academies like Hudson's, then we decided to take off to someplace else because our economy was capable of producing the wealth that would get us out to suburbia. And it was the great department stores, by and large, that also helped build the suburban outlets that ultimately would be the undoing of the department stores.
Do you think Mr. Eisenhower and his building of the throughways, what do you call them, the superhighway, what do you call them? The interstates, yeah. And that was building a thing that was a precursor to the suburbanization of America? Or where does that fit in? The traffic patterns that were encouraged by policy by Washington and by the private sector?
Well, I think post-World War II, there's a convergence of a number of factors. One of them is the interstate highway system that not only built roads out of the cities, but it built roads in the cities to access suburbia. There's also the housing policies that went into effect as part of the FHA and the GI Bill that encouraged the building of new housing. And if you were going to build new housing, cities were by and large built up. So new housing would have to be built someplace else. So you have a policy that encourages the development of single-family suburban housing, new housing, not rehab housing, which was not sponsored by these initiatives. Then you have a road system that would get people efficiently and quickly into and out of the city, and those factors all converge, and they produce this great move in America towards suburbanization.
And the move to the world, how does that stack up on a world pattern in terms of our thinking, not only between, let's say, 70 or so when that was beginning here, or the interstate system or Eisenhower time, and then the world development?
Well, I think I believe I'm correct in saying by the year 2008, for the first time, the majority of the world's population is urban. That is, most of us live in some kind of urban situation. Perhaps not in a traditional city. And I think that's where, again, Detroit has a lot to tell us. If it's difficult to think about the city of Detroit in traditional urban terms, that is, the population of the city of Detroit was almost 2 million in the 1950s. Now it's somewhere around 800,000. The metropolitan population of Detroit is in excess of 4 million. So it presents a problem of definition. When you say Detroit, what exactly do you mean? Do you mean things within the old statutory boundaries of the city? Do you mean this larger metropolitan situation? So there's a way in which traditional definitions no longer are adequate to the experience of people on the ground. And I think that is very much a global situation where you have gigantic cities, Mumbai, for example, and Mexico City. And it makes you think, whatever our definitions, they don't seem adequate to the experience on the ground any longer. And I think that's very much a characteristic of Detroit. How to apply old definitions? Well, they don't seem to work as well. We need some new definitions to think things through.
So we're talking about change in a major way. We're talking about change in a major way. And then also, we're talking now from and in relationship to an educational institution, Wayne State University, which is Midtown Detroit, and you've got other universities, University of Michigan, Michigan State, and so forth. But Wayne State has been very crucial to the actual urban area called Detroit, which has many characteristics that are unique, but also redolent of things from the past, and also indicative of problems that are confronting the human condition on a world scale again. Now, a model that could be repaired to by a great number of people trying to understand how we can best improve the human condition, I would submit. I wonder how you think about that.
Well, I would say that I feel lucky and fortunate indeed to work for a great research institution, Reid State University, that's among two other great research institutions in our state and other great institutions of higher learning. But what we have is that the school I work for is positioned ideally right here in the midtown of Detroit. For my money, I'm a Detroiter now, so I'm going to say this is the most interesting place in our country.
Really? That's interesting.
To work for a great research university in the middle of this great city, I think is the best possible place, especially for somebody like me whose interest is cities and what it means to be an American, which I would say, if we have a great classic, Americans, our great classic is the city. If you want to understand who we are and how we got here, and what confronts us in the future, then I would say the city is our great classic text, and I feel like I'm sitting right at the middle of that classic at one of the most interesting times imaginable in the history of Detroit.
I'm glad you have such a good tablet to work on, Mr. Picasso. It's rather a good canvas that you can use there. That's true. And I wonder, you know, Wayne State University is wanting to become, Wayne State in Detroit has had a great number of racial questions. It was a source of a great deal of what was called the Great Migration from the South. So there's a great number of people of color, black and you know, people that are there. So it's got a great mixture of people, and it's also wanting to become a major research institute. I think its medical school is world renowned and others and so forth. But they also have had an ability, and part of their mission is to be able to reach not only to the super bright or something of that sort, but to the great numbers of people who are looking for an opportunity to get a leg up in the world. And they've also had that as part of their mission, which is worthy of considering their concern for some of the least advantaged among us, if you understand what I'm saying.
Surely, and I think that is historically, and I'm proud to say, very much a proud part of my institution's heritage, our institution's heritage. You're an alum.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Proudly so, yeah.
The university takes very seriously its commitment to access and opportunity, which I think gets back to the notion we were talking about as the arsenal of democracy. In times when this is not like it was in World War II, times when that arsenal of democracy refers directly to the defense industry. I think in a time such as this, to be the arsenal of democracy means maintaining access and opportunity for people so that they can come here to the city, come here to the university, and find a way forward in their lives. And that is very much the case. I think we are, in the Honors College as well, looking for making good that promise of access and opportunity. Some of our students earned their place in the Honors College by having high academic achievement. Some of them have found a place with us because of their commitment to the community. Some of them found a place with us because they're willing to work very hard. We want people who are gathered to this notion of opportunity to be city-based and service-oriented, which is the basis of our college.
Absolutely.
And what that means is that excellence has many different forms, and that's what we want. We want to make sure that we invite young people who want to challenge themselves at the highest level and to get the most out of a great university in a great American city.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. And Detroit is really, really interesting in that regard. I wonder, we have 2 or 3 clips that we thought we might include in this first segment. I wonder if maybe we could set that up in the booth if we could, to get it come in seamlessly with some thoughts about Wayne University as part of this melting pot that is the city of Detroit. And maybe if we could set that up and run that, it runs a minute or two, something like that, the first clip. And let's see if we can do that in the booth now and run that clip now.
We are Wayne State University.
We are Wayne State University.
We are Wayne State University.
We are Wayne State University, and we are changing the world.
We made an indelible contribution
to a city,
to a nation,
and to the world.
Just like we have for nearly 150 years.
We're made up of some of the smartest
and toughest, the most tenacious, persistent,
and innovative students
who have ever sought knowledge.
We live on campus, we commute.
We're local, we're national,
we're international.
We're the most diverse student body in Michigan.
That's important because if you want your point of view
you to be understood.
You better learn to understand another.
Better learn to understand others. We've accomplished a lot in 1 year. We made an economic impact. We made a medical impact.
We made a social
We made a
impact.
social impact.
We made a scientific
We made a
impact.
scientific impact.
We made an academic impact.
We made a local impact.
We're recognized by the Carnegie Foundation
For having very high research activity.
The National Institutes of Health awards us grants that improve the lives of thousands of babies and moms globally.
We're one of only 3 universities in
Only
the state.
3 universities in the state who are part of the University Research Corridor.
We make discoveries here that aren't being made anywhere else in the world.
Anywhere else in the world.
Beyond our 200-acre campus of green space and walking paths, you can have Detroit. Threshold to the great big world.
Great big world.
We'll put our experience up against any other.
Because long before there was a movement to save the city,
Way before it was cool to wear t-shirts that said Detroit versus everybody.
Before the hipsters,
The slow rolls,
the lost,
The brew pubs.
and the segways,
there was a place that was thought-provoking,
Unapologetic.
hands-on,
Learn as you work with no excuses.
a place that said, here's your chance.
a place to invent,
or reinvent,
To experiment,
And produced.
To take some knocks.
but never break.
but never break.
that place was and is Wayne State University.
So from us to you,
Welcome to Wayne State. And remember, always
Aim higher.
Aim higher.
aim higher.
Aim higher.
Aim higher.
Okay, well, that's a good thing. Aim higher. That's a good idea. And wider, too. I think that we were talking before, Jerry, about how it's not only aim higher in terms of, let's say, servicing the brightest and so forth, but we've got to have a democratic notion of of education to include everybody in a context where they can be involved rather than just a few favored ones that used to be the lot of the prep school era and so forth, if you understand what I'm saying, right?
Surely.
Uh-huh.
And in terms of this notion of being a university of access and opportunity, certainly we want to provide the very best educational experience to our students, and we want to meet them in all of the different ways that they come to us.
Uh-huh.
So to be an excellent student, as I was suggesting, means a lot of different things to different people. For some, it's a commitment to academic standards. For some, it's a commitment to service in addition to academics. For others, it's a commitment to their own particular path that they want to follow. But we want to be sure of them, is that, and particularly in our honors college, is that if a student wants to come here and hold themselves to the highest standard, whatever that standard is, appropriate to their experience, if they want to get the most out of a great university, then we would like to help them succeed in that mission.
Yeah, we want to talk about that. Also, I think it's worthwhile because, of course, I think the nation and the world is aware that Detroit has gone through in the recent experience a great bankruptcy. There's a great deal of support. Mr. Obama helped give support to the automobile industry, which was a wise thing on his part. One of the first things he did upon inauguration. And there's also been a great deal of attention. The Ford Foundation's giving attention. They've been able to save the great art collection. The Detroit Institute of Art has a collection that rivals the Prado or something like that. They've been able to save all of that. And then they've also attracted, have they not? It's beginning to come on strong now, coming out of that period that was immediately behind us. And it's becoming a focus for a great deal of entrepreneurial activity. And the town is starting to come alive with entrepreneurial energy and that sort of thing, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, absolutely correct. And I would like to say this is certainly an exciting time to be in the great city of Detroit. I think what we've discovered nationally is something that I felt when I first came here in 1982. I had never been to the city. When I moved here to live, I'd only visited it as part of a job interview process.
Yeah.
When I walked around this place, I felt like there was a way in which I felt at home in Detroit. That is, I felt at home in the sense of this being such an American place, a place that gathers all the differences that call us into being as a people, a place of heroic achievements. And I thought, I haven't really lived here before, but in a way it feels like I have already. And I think during the bankruptcy proceedings and the good events that followed that, the good events in terms of our commitment to this place, I think the people of this country said, you know, we all have a part in Detroit. We all have a hand in what goes on in Detroit. We're all responsible for the well-being of that place that has meant so much to this country. And it's a very proud thing to see us recognized and embraced by so many different people in so many different places as we were to make the recovery of Detroit now a reality.
Yeah, it's making it a reality, and it's not only Silicon Valley or K Street where the entrepreneurs are putting attention. They're putting attention, as I understand it, I'm anxious to follow up on it all, leading edge entrepreneurial activity and all the aspects of what that means for the development of, or the recovery and the growth of a large economy. It's not just Silicon Valley or New York or K Street or something. Detroit's becoming a focus, and then following in that, the restaurants are starting to come, the show places. Motown was part of the tradition of that city. It's starting to come alive in a really Renaissance kind of way. That's the impression I get from distant, but you're on the spot. Do you feel something of that yourself as you go about your life in that, in Detroit?
I do indeed. And I think you suggest in your comments something that's important to keep in mind about this place. Virtually back to the beginning, in the 18th century, this has been a city where people came to have new ideas, to try out new things. And it was certainly that way at the beginning of the automobile industry. Tinkerers and mechanics would come here because this is where people had skills, where they were inventing things that nobody had ever seen before. We didn't even know what to call that thing, the automobile. The horseless carriage was about the best that people could come up with until they figured out what the thing was really for.
Big change,
and there were all the convergent energies and industries that gather around the automobile industry, so that what you see, I think, currently with the reinvigoration of the city and its economy, and as you pointed out, it's about information, it's about service, it's about the whole range of industrial technologies that are now getting reinvented. That's something that the city has been historically really good at for the whole of its history.
Yeah, I wanted to take on a personal privilege. My family goes back into the, well into the 19th century in Detroit and Michigan. And I'm not at all sure, but on my paternal side, my father's side, his mother, the grandmother, my grandmother, was the first woman ever to graduate from the University of Michigan Medical College in 1888. She broke the glass ceiling.
Incredible.
I mean, that was really something, because I think, I mean, there's a lot of change between now and then, and that's good. And I'm not sure, and I'm going to put this out because it's folklore, like, sort of, but they lived on 16th Street in Detroit. I'm not sure where that is now. I was young, but when in my grandmother's garage, I'm not sure, okay? But I do believe when he's about 8 or 9 years old, Mr. Ford tinkered in their garage. He was destined to become the great Ford Motor Company and building of the automobile industry and all that sort of thing. And Detroit was that, and I think Mr. Edison had roots in Michigan and Detroit, if I'm not mistaken, another major entrepreneurial bringer of electricity, among other things. You understand what I'm saying?
Certainly, and I think, as I was suggesting, I think even before the automobile, there were marine engine makers, there were people who made steam locomotives, there were people who did boats and ship manufacturing. So that the city has always been really good at inventing the next thing and inventing itself as the city that would be home to the great next thing, whether that was steam technology of the 19th century or it was automobile technology of the 20th century. And now I think what's coming next is not only information and the kinds of technologies related to the information economy, but also the reinventing of mobility, so that it's not just about automobiles, it's about personal mobility and all of the different things that may mean.
Very good, yeah. Could you spell that out a little bit? Personal mobility, freedom, is that another? Personal mobility, to be able to move in a lot of different directions and ways, it's redolent of the word freedom in many ways of thinking, if you know what I'm saying,
I think it's, well, you might look at it in terms of what happened between steam locomotives and the automobile. It was very much the feeling that one industry has to protect itself from another industry in order to survive. That is, if you're a buggy maker or if you're a coach maker, you think the automobile is my enemy. When in fact, if you've been able to think, wait a minute, I make buggies, I make coaches, cars are kind of like coaches. How do we, instead of thinking of ourselves as a closed industry that sees the other as a kind of hostile possibility, what if we thought about what we're really talking about now is a new kind of mobility? And I think we're at a similar place now in the 21st century, where we will certainly still have private automobiles, but we may have personal transportation. We may have shared transportation. We may have more sophisticated bicycles or human-powered vehicles. And I think we here in Detroit are going to be right at the center of inventing this next new thing in mobility.
And that's a larger theme, being able, particularly in a time where there's exponential growth going on, where you have patterns that you inherited out of history. The human species has been here a couple 100,000 years. It's been a long run, as they say on Broadway, and the pace of change is picking up now. So it's important to be able to subsume or to incorporate the things from history, but not lose sight upon what the new offers, and be able to incorporate those two concepts is something that's a challenge to one and all, including our political, business, and intellectual leadership, to understand how we can navigate that transformation encompassing history, but not being subservient to it, is recognizing that it's been subsumed in a new and advanced and progressive pattern in a large scale.
Certainly, and I think to look at one of the fine things we have here in Detroit, if you think about Diego Rivera's Detroit Industry Murals,
magnificent,
at the Detroit Institute of Arts, it's a wonderful depiction of just what you described. Rivera painted the Rouge River plant, what was at the time in the 1930s the world's largest industrial facility.
Yes.
Ford Motor Company was centered. He painted the industrial plant as the main scenes in those Detroit Industry Murals, but up above, he also paints this kind of evolutionary, he presents this evolutionary depiction of the strata of the earth, the kind of geological formations, as if to put Detroit industry, Detroit mechanical industry, in the context of these larger historical forces. So that I think the two are in sync. That is, in sync in the sense that human industry evolves just as the whole scape of our planet. Tectonic plates move, the geological strata move and change. And I think the challenge is to figure out, how do we open ourselves creatively to this possibility of change and evolution, instead of closing ourselves to the possibility that the future is a threat. No, it's not a threat. The future is an open book, and we haven't yet written our next chapter in it.
Thank you.
And that's one of the great invigorating things about this place right now, is that I think that next great chapter is being written.
Okay, I think that's very well said, and I think that's unique to our time. It's hard to say. Who was it? It was, I forget who it was. It was who said, history is a nightmare from which we're attempting to awaken. I think it was James Joyce. But anyway, that we're awakening to new possibilities of liberation, perhaps. Liberation seems to be in the air, and it's a privilege to have been born into this particular time, it would seem to me. Jerrey, I wonder, maybe we have another clip. We got a couple more, but we have another clip that I wonder if it might be, we could try to bring that in the booth now. Another clip that relates to, again, Wayne University and that Midtown section of Detroit. It's a brief clip. And I wonder if maybe in the booth, if you could bring that clip up. We're speaking with Jerrey Herron from Wayne State.
Other universities offer a semester in Detroit. We offer every semester in Detroit. We are what we are. We do what we do, and we are going to be second to none at what we do. Our collective vision is bold, to become the preeminent public urban research university in the country. A good university does everything it can to make sure that every single student graduates. Each and every one of you can make a difference, and I urge you to do so. one way or another, we all have a stake in the success of Wayne State University. We're in this together, so I'm glad that you're all here.
Another tribute to our new president, Roy Wilson, a very interesting and good and leader at the helm of the university. We're going to have another little clip with him that, in a certain sense, pokes a little fun, which is par for the course in television these days. A good guy. We've had a great leadership. We're going to be talking about, the honors program that you are representing, who was a former president and so forth. But that's interesting. That again, that it's the emergence of Wayne University within this larger context. Yeah.
Indeed, we were very fortunate in the leadership of President Wilson.
Yeah, he's good. That is true. So we're going to want to, in the second hour, we're going to want to talk some about the honors program. I've been out of academia for quite a while, although I've kept an interest in things intellectually and so forth. Things are changing. The challenge to the country and the challenge to the educational institutions is very profound. And Wayne State University is one. They're wanting to become not only serving the interests of some of the people to get a leg up in terms of being able to find a niche within the society, but also leading research and so forth. They want to become a leading research institution. And how does that look? There's a lot of research going on at a lot of universities. They have a way of rating them and so forth in terms of new discoveries and cutting edge kind of thing. How does Wayne State take up or Detroit as a vector or as a medium to the leading edge discoveries of the intellectual community writ large on a world scale? In your vision, do you think, in your assessment, how does Wayne State and Detroit stack up in terms of a place of leading intellectual leadership for the world?
I believe the city, back to its inception, but certainly in the 20th and the 21st centuries, the city of Detroit has always been a place where the future is under construction, where the future is being invented in the whole range of technologies and industries that define this great city of ours. And in terms of the university, the Carnegie Foundation rates all of the schools and colleges in the United States, and they rank the schools in order in terms of research productivity. They look at a group of objective criteria to evaluate the research productivity of these institutions. And there are, I believe, it's only 108, I think is the number, of research universities with very high activity. That's the highest rating that the Carnegie Foundation provides. Wayne State University is one of those, one of these very few in this country, universities to occupy that highest research rating. And as to what it means, if I were making this a pitch to students and their parents when they're here on campus, and I'm hoping to recruit young scholars to come and join us here at Wayne State University, I put it this way, that if you would like to be in class with a teacher who is inventing the future and is creating new knowledge in the field, that's what this research rating means. And I think that's among the most exciting places to be, in a classroom where the professor is helping to invent the future where we're all going to live. And now this doesn't just mean in medical research, which we do, in engineering, which we do, in physics or astronomy or chemistry, biology. It means all of those things, but it also means in my field, literature, cultural studies, and the languages, the language arts, and theater and drama. All of us are in this same research project together, inventing the future where we're all going to live. And that's an exciting place indeed to be in.
That would be a place that Paris in its day and everything like that would be an environment that would attract the intellectual, an environment that would attract the intellectual leadership that is going to be able to find fellows and then you've got the clubs developing and the arts and the restaurants and the whole thing that makes for an environment that is stimulating to intellectual or creative activity. It's a happening place, a place to be, particularly if you're young and coming up, it would seem to me.
I would agree indeed. And I would point to a second distinction that we're very proud of We certainly are very proud of the Research University Very High Activity classification. The Carnegie Foundation also evaluates schools in terms of their community engagement. And there's only a handful of schools to occupy both the highest research category and the category of recognizing community engagement, and we are among those. So not only is it research, not only is it creating new knowledge, it's creating new knowledge that's going to directly benefit the community where we live and engaging that community to make them part of this adventure of inventing the future.
That's a great combo, a great twofer, as they would say in New York, because you're not just elite catering to the elite few, as has been the case in terms of social organization throughout a good deal of human history, it would seem to me. There would be a few who would be at the royal court or so forth, but it's also taking on this challenge of democracy and involving the whole of a society in a liberated or in a maximally engaged way that seems to be the promise of the time in which we were born into, in a unique kind of historical context, it seems to me.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that is very much the promise of democracy, and there's no finer work, I believe, as a college professor, no finer work to do than to work in education. I mean, education is the way that we gain access to all of the good things that will come after: the careers, the engagement with the community, the careers of activism and political activism, the kinds of things we need to do in order to make a good and just world available to all of us.
Yeah, how about on the arts and so forth? You're aware of that. I mean, that was the place of Motown, was it not? Wasn't that a major movement in terms of that? John Sinclair used to be there doing poetry and so forth. Jazz was there. There was a great deal of interest in the creative arts and so forth that it seems to me is being reborn in that city, if I understand things from reading and looking in, sources and so forth. The arts are coming back.
Absolutely. The arts are coming back. The arts have a great foundation to build on. If you were here in my office with me, you would see in the background, which you can probably make out a little bit, there's pieces on the wall which are from what were called cast corridor artists. That is, artists who were active here in Detroit in the 60s, 70s, and 80s on into the 90s, from a collection of a benefactor to the university. And I think what we're seeing is a continuation of that kind of engagement, where creative people like Berry Gordy and Motown, artists and painters, sculptors, dancers, want to be where the convergent energies of a society get together and create the kinds of spontaneous attachments that these artists felt, looking at this place, feeling it, listening to it, seeing what it sounded like, and then being able to talk back to it through the medium of their art.
And it's not only that, but it's also, if we hearken back, again, my roots go back there and everything, I think it's the longest unguarded border with another country in the world or something along the Detroit River and so forth. And it's such a gorgeous countryside. I mean, the forests and so forth, the natural environment of that state is absolutely magnificent, with the lakes and with the natural setting that is just natural to it. And it's got the connection to the St. Lawrence Thruway and freeway, the St. Lawrence system, access to the ocean and so forth. The natural setting is also very grand and worthy of consideration for people who might be thinking about maybe picking up and taking a look at Detroit or Michigan itself as a place to start thinking about locating themselves and their activity.
No, I couldn't agree more. It's not for nothing it's called the Great Lakes State. It's a peninsula surrounded by gorgeous water, by some of the prettiest forests that you could hope to see. As you said, the border with Canada is, I think, also not only just an extensive border, but it's also one of the busiest borders. It's a commercial place. It's a place of great recreational possibilities, thanks to the water. It's a spectacularly good place to live. And we've got plenty of room. People should just come on down.
Come on down or come on over that way. I couldn't agree with you more, and it's really good to be talking along that. And I'm happy to see that that it is all coming back from what had been a difficult time. And I guess when did you actually come to be in Detroit yourself personally, Jerry, and start writing that material, or start writing the material that is so well encapsulated the whole historical development of that city of Detroit? When did you first come? I didn't quite remember.
I got here in 1982.
Boy, that was a time of happening. Yeah, right, like that. And you've been writing on that very well, and you've been writing extensively on it. And you've also taken very good attention to a lot of the pictorial history that you've been able to do, like the Hudson's Department Store, the demolishment of it. And you've been writing on that in it with a historical understanding. And you, again, like Gibbon, you were talking about seeing it in a historical context is quite unique, it seems to me.
Well, thank you. And I think one of the things that's important to understand is, especially when this city was in some of its hardest times, is that people who from someplace else, or even people here, would look at it and say, gosh, wonder what happened. Wonder what happened there, as if it was something that happened to other people.
Yeah.
And this is where I would like to point out that what happened in Detroit is an exaggerated version of what happened in America.
Okay.
That we built cities, and then almost overnight, it seems, we walked away from the cities. We walked away from the cities, but not everybody. We left behind problems, unresolved problems in the city. They were very complicated ones. And it was perhaps convenient to think that they were problems that belonged to somebody else that no longer had to do with us, whoever we happen to be. When in fact, I think we're all in this together, and there's no place that's more powerfully capable of representing that truth than the city. We are all in this together. We are responsible for each other. And we can understand the city. We can understand conditions that are sometimes hard. We can understand those if we look at where they came from, and we look at them as a product of human decisions, some of them good, some of them not so good. But anything we can understand how to change. It's the things that we don't understand that baffle us and confront us and often make us turn away in fear or turn away and say, well, not me. Where we can understand, we can always make better.
The challenge of change is before us all, I think. We have all this stuff at the current, say, June of 2015 with the legacy of the South with slavery, and the Confederate flag is being discussed. We have a history of slavery that was part of the context of this nation. And so what we have is this idea of being able to be optimistic about the current context and change that can be subsuming history, but at the same time having respect for it, like we would have respect for the founding documents of our nation or the whole historical context of the human experience, but also having an opening upon the new possibilities, which is also exciting, but to be doing it in a way that can incorporate both. It's a tough thing to try and bring the new, like you use the beggy whip makers as opposed to the automobile, that kind of a thing. That's something that's moving exponentially now, it seems to me, and is a unique challenge to our time to move with such rapid transformation occurring exponentially in information and now into robotics. It seems we're going to have airplanes that will fly themselves. They're going to have trains that will drive themselves, trucks that will be able to move without the input of a driver. And so there's all kinds of changes that are coming in an exponentially new kind of way, which is challenging and also calls for summoning the best of what can be done in terms of reified institutions, but also being an opening upon meaningful change. It's an incredibly interesting time to have been born in perhaps a unique way historically.
Oh, I agree. And while you were talking, I thought of an idea that I discuss with the students in our honors classes often. It's something that I would call the ecology of hope.
Yes, okay.
And my proposal to them is that just in the same way that the natural world has an ecology, like the water, the air, the earth, it's an ecology that is subject to harm. You can put things into the water or the earth or the air that are detrimental. You may not see them directly, you may not experience them immediately, but they're still harmful. They're still there. But an ecological system, like the water, the earth, or the air, can heal itself if it's given time, if it's given help. And I think hope works the same way. And we can put things into the ecology of hope. We can say, oh, that doesn't have anything to do with me. I just won't look at that. I'll pretend that that problem doesn't exist. Same way you can put heavy metals into the groundwater and say, well, I can't see them, so they probably don't exist. And I think to assign to the ecology of hope, to assign a whole range of things, well, I just won't look at that. I won't pay attention to that. I won't try to understand it. Is damaging to that ecology. I think what I was saying a moment ago, what we can understand how to change. And if we embrace the things that are here in terms of understanding where they came from, thinking how they might change, we can preserve the ecology of hope so that you can look at challenges to the future. You can look at things that have never existed before and remain hopeful about them. You can say, instead of rejecting them as something that I don't want to think about, that I feel might be a threat to me, how can I be part of that? How can I incorporate it? How can I understand it and become party to the future that is going to happen with or without me? The future is going to be there. The question is, how do I embrace it and make myself a part of it? And I think that's the ecology of hope at work.
Very, very, very well said, and very, very important in terms of the whole human condition, I would say. That's a question that's confronting us in stark and realistic new terms. It seems to me it's a great challenge, and that's the challenge of education or of advancement and so forth, and it's very well said. I like that very much. You write very well, I want to say. I've been reading a great deal of it, and I really thank you for that. One thing is, I think we have one more clip that I think we might get in on this particular program, and it's a sort of lighthearted look at our new the president of the university, Roy Wilson. And I wonder if maybe in the booth, if we could bring that little clip up with the president of Wayne State University, please. Please bring that up.
Excuse me, do you know what time it is?
It's time to get to class.
That's kind of funny. That's kind of funny. It's time to get to class. Yeah.
Exactly.
And he's checking. That's the old. Is that the old main building, if I'm not mistaken?
That is. Once upon a time, that was Detroit Central High School. And that is one of the first sites that helped to launch Wayne State University, then called Wayne University.
It was Wayne. Now, when did it become Wayne State? I'm not. I've been away from Detroit. You know, when did that happen?
Now, you asked me a really good question, and I should be able to give you a specific answer. I believe it was in the 1950s when Wayne University became part of the state system.
Okay, I was there. Okay, well, that's good. It's not fair. I'm not sure myself. Anyway, I just know it was a very welcoming thing, and I was very happy to be associated with it. And it's been good to be associated with the school of Detroit. I enjoyed Wayne State very much. I understand that the Dakota Inn is still functioning. Is that true?
I believe that is correct.
Have you been there lately? Have you lifted a stein or two at the Dakota Inn recently or not?
Not recently for me, but I know the place you're talking about.
That's a saloon, not a saloon. It's a ratskeller where everybody goes, and they have big oaken tables, and they have big steins of beer. Right? And you go and they got a guy in a barrel plays George M. Cohan songs, and everybody sings. And after one or two steins of beer, everybody thinks they're Caruso or Maria Callas, and everybody sings "Give My Regards to Broadway" and everything like that. I remember that fondly. I remember that fondly. Yes.
That's indicative. By the way,
Yes,
Wayne
sir.
State became Wayne State University in 1956.
Thank you very much. That's the year I was there. I was just leaving. Yeah.
So I
Okay.
was pretty close.
Yeah, you were good as usual. Yeah, that's good.
The Dakota Inn that you're referencing in the German population of Detroit that's indicative of what a great melting pot, as they call it.
Absolutely.
And the city has been. It's always been a place that welcomed people.
Absolutely.
There was a substantial immigrant German population, especially in the second half of the 19th century, along with a great influx of Irish immigrants who came to Detroit. So we have a cork town. We have a part of downtown that once upon a time, I'm told, was called Germantown, where there were German signs in the windows. Church services would be delivered in German, and there's still pieces, like you're referring to, pieces of that cultural history that are still available here in the great city of Detroit. Yeah,
Hamtramck. Yeah, a great number of people, and the Ford factory and the Packard factory. Wasn't that a major event? The automobile industry was focused there, and it's a grand old town, and I'm really pleased to have been back in touch with it through our association with you and with the other people at Wayne State University. Well, it's a great pleasure talking to you about New York. I mean, from New York, about Wayne State and Detroit. And we're going to be talking with you on another hour. We want to talk with you about this honors program that you're the dean of. And we want to talk about the structure of university educational patterns, the tradition, and the projection and the role of higher education in terms of the development of the national and world economy and the society. But for now, thank you very much. It's so good talking to you, Jerry. It's so good. You're looking very good, and I'm glad to see. You're in your own office from which we're speaking now, right?
Yes, I'm in my office here at the Irvin D. Reid Honors College at Wayne State University. And it's been great talking to you.
It's been great talking to you, and we got to do more of this, and we will over the time ahead. But that Irvin D. Reid College, we want to talk about that and the phenomena of the honors program, and also the way in which it's dealt with by people who are involved with the educational pattern across the country. And also, I would like to think we might have some outreach in this way to educational institutions and the concept of Manhattan Neighborhood Network, where we're talking to you from, and also the public access cable television phenomena, which is part of the national pattern, and the possibility of there being real educational communication between those two entities in the time ahead. So we've been pleasure talking with Jerrey Herron then, and he's the dean, as you can see, of the Irvin D. Honors College at Wayne State University. We'll be coming back with more in the second hour, so that'll be coming the day after this program is airing. Jerry, thanks so much. We'll be coming back in the audience, and thanks so much for all the work. Look forward to doing another program with you momentarily at the finish of this one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harold. It's been a joy being with you.
Okay. Okay, very good. Let's let the graphic be up on that. And so let's put the picture over Mr. Herron for a while. So if you got a few last words, we got about 20 seconds left. You got some words of wisdom. You could use haiku for some real words of wisdom. The graphic is over you now, Jerry. So if you got some word of wisdom you can perform, you've got 10, 9, you got 9 seconds.
I invite everybody to come see us in the great city of Detroit and to stop in and visit us at the Irvin D. Reid Honors College.
All right, that's well said, well said. Okay, thank you very, very much. Thanks for viewing. We'll be coming back with an addition to this program tomorrow here in New York City. So thank you for viewing, and we'll be coming back then. Thank you very much indeed. Great show. Okay.